The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Tabula and Mobil Monkey webinar. We're going to allow a couple extra minutes for people to log in, so we'll get started here in about 2 minutes. Thanks. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I think we're ready to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Larry to kick it off. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My talk, we're talking about growth marketing hacks for 2018. I'm going to present 5 of them. Elad's going to present the other 5. And here we go. So I love PPC, I can't lie. The problem is it's getting a little old. It's kind of 20 years old. It's kind of a technological dinosaur in technology years, and it's definitely showing some signs of old age. What I mean by this is the cost per clicks are ridiculously high. Every quarter, the costs per clicks are getting higher and higher, and every 1% increase in cost per click is basically a 1% decrease in ROI for you or your clients. Especially if you're working in specific verticals in competitive, countries or locations, these search clicks are enormously expensive. It's not just search. Facebook ad prices are increasing like crazy. I was just looking at a campaign this morning with $120 CPMs. Like those CPMs used to be like $5 or $10. And it's not typical. It's not uncommon to see like $3, $4, $5 clicks. We're seeing increases by 37% per quarter. The other problem that I have here is that the conversion rates kind of are stinkers. Despite all the hype about conversion rate optimization, typically, the typical median conversion rate is around 2% still today in 2018. And so today in my presentation, I wanted to talk about some crazy PPC hacks where we could maybe lower the cost per clicks and raise the conversion rates. But I'm not looking for little changes like puny little 2% gains, or I'm looking for big order of magnitude kind of gains, like where you can 10x or 5x your improvements. And just to kind of clarify the definition of what I'm talking about here, when I talk about PPC hacks, I'm talking about we're looking for high leverage, so meaning like huge impact for minimal effort. Okay, so like this, it can't be like spend another year working on something. Okay. Hopefully these are things that are non-obvious, so stuff that people aren't doing, and I'm trying to center my attention on kind of popular marketing platforms such as Tabula, Facebook, Google, etc. All right, so that's kind of what we're talking about. I applied that screen to all of my different tactics, and I'm going to give you my top 5. Before getting into the hacks, I just want to introduce myself briefly. My name is Larry. I'm obsessed with unicorns. I started WordStream in a bakery back in 2008 because of free Wi-Fi and unlimited Diet Coke refills. The company is now a 300, almost a 400-person company, which we were able to grow from nothing, literally, to one of the world's largest pay-per-click marketing platforms. It was acquired last month for $150 million. I started a new business in the chatbot marketing space, building. It's kind of like a chatbot builder for Facebook Messenger called Mobil Monkey. I have a family, 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 2-month-old, and outside of work, I'm restoring a 200-year-old haunted house in Cambridge, Massachusetts, over the last 2 years, and it should be done in a month or 2. All right, enough about me. We're back to our story. We're talking about my top 5 unicorn growth marketing hacks for PPC in 2018. So starting with a Facebook idea. Okay, so the Facebook idea here is you know the drill. It's like the higher the click-through rate on your ads, the higher your relevancy score, the lower your cost per click, right? So the question is, how do you raise those click-through rates to be, instead of 1%, like how do you get them up to 20 or 30%? And so we've come up with something here that I think is pretty new. It's called Larry's inverted unicorn ad targeting methods for tripling click-through rate. So what the heck does this have to do? How does this work? So normally when you're doing ad targeting, the idea is you're very specific, you're very picky. You're going after, people who have certain interests, certain demographics, certain behaviors, and you cast this narrow net to sort of maximize the click-through rates, right? The problem with that this approach is that just because this audience is the perfect audience for your products and services, it doesn't mean that they're going to reciprocate. It doesn't mean that they're going to be interested in whatever you're offering, right? So this is an example of this. So like you're selling, I don't know, marketing software. So typically what you would do is you go after people who like email marketing and have marketing job titles, right? This is very typical, where you kind of narrow your focus and try to be very specific with who you're targeting. So we've come up with this new idea. It's kind of crazy. I'm calling it the inverted unicorn ad targeting method. And the idea here is to, instead of going more narrow, you go broader. Okay, so you go after 2 completely unrelated interests. So for example, you could target people who like marketing and people who like Game of Thrones, like people who like the Iris Stark or Sansa Stark fan page or whatever, Jon Snow. So what does Game of Thrones have to do with email marketing? Absolutely nothing. But we're targeting the intersection of people who like email marketing and Game of Thrones. And the reason why this is an interesting marketing strategy or targeting strategy is it allows you to do things in creatives in your ads, where you can kind of speak to not just one interest, but rather 2 or 3 or 4 different interests of a person, which really compels a person to want to actually click on your thing. We've been doing some experience with this stuff, and basically what we're finding is that you end up with an unusually high click-through rate, because if you don't understand why these jokes are funny, you would have never seen the ad in the first place. You see what I'm saying? So like the people who see this, it resonates with them, we can get high click-through rates and low CPMs, like $1 CPM is pretty typical. All right, next hack. My Facebook Messenger marketing hack. And so, this idea has to do with, circumventing the news feed, which is kind of really difficult to get any exposure these days, and connect directly with users using a product like Mobil Monkey. So messaging, there's more daily active users of messaging than there is of social media, yet less than 1% of companies have any ability to engage with customers on messaging. The open rates for email and social and the view rates for social media is abysmal. Compare that to 70 or 80% engagement rates on messaging, and you can see why this is a very interesting channel. Messaging, it's more than just email. It's more engaging. So like you can send, surveys or registration forms or drip campaigns directly through to users' phones on messaging, and it's super engaging. And basically, I'm going to share something personal here. This is my own results. I do email marketing and I do chat blasting on Messenger, and typically, my open rates are pretty. They're around 20% is pretty typical for my email blasts, and a 1 or 2% open rates. In terms of the chat blasts, I can get 50 or 60% read rates and 8 to 20% response rate. So that's pretty interesting. So this is an example of me doing a chat blast where I blasted a guy named Neil Patel with one of my new blog posts, and he actually read it. You know how I know he read it? You can see his little avatar there at the bottom bottom right side of the screen. So it's really effective. The way this works is you can chat blast anyone who messages your page or anyone who subscribes to your messaging content, and then once they subscribe, you get their contact information. So you get your profile photo, first and last name, location, etc. And so once we have that information, we can then do chat blasts. We can create. It's just kind of like MailChimp. You can create messages and specify audiences to blast people on Facebook Messenger, and there's other ways of doing this. You can automatically blast all of your new blog content to these subscribers, or you can even send them a sequence of messages, in a drip sequence based on one or more triggers. Okay, and so at this point, I'd like to just give you a quick live example of how this works. You guys are all at a computer right now, so Elad and others, if you could just go to bit.ly/fb-blaster. So bit.ly/fb-blaster. Maybe if we could even add the link in the comments, that would be great. But it's bit.ly/fb-blaster. If you could just go to this link, it'll just show you exactly how that works as an example. See, here it is. It's just saying, would you like to receive occasional tips and tricks about how to use, Facebook Messenger marketing? If you click the yes button, don't worry, you can unsubscribe at any time just by clicking stop. But it'll just show you a couple examples of a drip campaign and how this works. Okay, so moving along here, how do you generate contacts? There's different ways to generate contacts. You can add sign up opt-ins, like to all of your sign up forms. How do you can auto respond to people who post comments on your Facebook posts. Okay, that's called a Facebook comment guard. Or you can even run these ads called send to messenger ads, where it sends people into your messaging funnel so you can engage with them and obtain their information as a subscriber. This is another great one where you can integrate your chatbot onto your website so that anyone who engages with you on chat becomes part of your messenger community. All right, so moving along, we're down to my number 3 hack, which is the Unicorn Slush Fund. The Unicorn Slush Fund is kind of like a new concept that I'm pioneering. It's an alternative to a monthly pay-per-click advertising budget. So basically what we're finding when it comes to like promoting of content, and it has a lot to do with the click-through rate, right? And so a lot of times the offers or the ad copy creative is just crappy, and so you end up with a 2% click-through rate and an ad campaign that goes nowhere. But once in a while, there's these really crazy ideas that you have, and they do really, really well with like 30 or 40% click-through rates. And so the Unicorn Slush Fund just says, like, rather than just allocating, $5,000 a month for ads, what you should do is you should have some flexibility to instead of use it or lose it, maybe add some flexibility over this idea of rollover. So like, if we don't have a really interesting campaign to promote this month, let's just save the budget, until next month, so that we can, double down on something more interesting when it makes itself apparent. So my number two pay-per-click advertising hack here has to do with the elimination of 90% of the click fraud through these ad display networks like Google Display Network and Facebook, which I think are really questionable investments in the first place, given the high amount of fraud. So the first thing you should be doing is you should be absolutely turning off the audience network in your Facebook ads, even if you're getting great conversions from them. The problem is they're most likely robots and fake clicks and fake conversions. In Google Display Network, it's a little more difficult to turn it off, but I can show you how you do it. Actually, this is using the old interface, but you basically you have to find the placements tab, and you this is actually a real example. So I was looking through one of my campaigns a few months ago, and just looking at the display network performance, and there was my ads were showing up on 48,000 different sites. So I thought that was pretty crazy. And then when I looked at the placement report to see where my ads were showing up, they were like, my top placement was something called fakereceipts.us that was generating like 22 conversions at $6 per conversion. And there's a saying, like, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. So like I kind of wanted to investigate these 22 conversions at $6 cost per conversion from fakereceipt.us, and of course it was just some phony baloney made for AdSense kind of placement, and there's like probably 1.5 million of these like on the Google Display Network probably, and so it's really hard for me to believe that that's my number one placement, because it's more likely just people clicking on ads and filling out conversion forms. This is my number two placement here, coolmath-games.com, which by the way was registered like a month ago. Like, really? Like, this website just appeared out of nowhere and became my number two site overnight? No. So basically, there's how do you combat this? You need to exclude placements, but the problem is there's just so much garbage in these networks that it's kind of like whack-a-mole, where there's like, the reason I know this because I spent like a week excluding 23,000 garbage sites, and every day there would be new ones popping up. So I've basically, the idea here is you need to say no to managed placements. That's where they decide where your ads should show up, and instead use something called managed. Automatic placements is bad. You want managed placements where you specify where you're going to show up. Just a few websites that are quality, as opposed to millions that are crap. And basically the way you find these is you do not use the Google Display Planner. That is like, it's basically a directory of crap. What you do is you go with you use something like SEMrush, which will show you, like, type in a domain name like Business Insiders, and it'll show you like domains that have lots of links pointing to them. So these are the ones that are likely to be not spam because they have so many links pointing to them. For my own display network campaigns, I typically run it on like, maybe 300 to 500 sites that I know are quality and are not fake. So my last hack here today has to do with a brand hack to doubling and tripling your click-through rates. So just FYI, I did some research on how the click-through rate varies based on new and repeat visitors. Okay, so you've got this idea of new visitors who've never heard of you before to your site, and so they have kind of a lower brand affinity, and versus repeat visitors who've visited your site before and have heard of you before. Okay, so how does that impact click-through rates? We just did some tests using RLSA, so, targeting the same ads, the same keywords, the same bids to new and repeat visitors, and what we saw was if people have heard of you, it's an enormous uplift. Like the click-through rates are like 2 to 3 times higher when you are talking to someone who's heard of you. And so it's not just the click-through rates, but the brand affinity also dramatically impacts the conversion rates to the tune of, like, they're 2 to 3 times more likely to buy from you if they've heard of you in the past. All right, so basically the solution here, we're talking about conversion rates and click-through rates here, it's difficult because by definition there's usually more people who haven't heard of you than have heard of you, right? There's more people in the universe or in the world that haven't heard of your business than there are that have heard of you. And so if you're only going after the people who've heard of you before, that's kind of really, it's like playing a sporting game with only defense and no offense, that doesn't make sense. So the idea here is we really need to work on building brand affinity so that instead of to grow the size of that darker circle by 10, 100, or even 1,000 times, and we need to do this in a more scalable ways. And paying like $5 a click on Facebook isn't necessarily the most scalable way of doing that. And so there's 2 hacks I have. One hack number 1 is to create content outside of your niche to connect with people and customers earlier. So basically what I'm talking about here is what are the interests of your target audience that you can credibly speak to and that are related to that are tangentially related to your target niche. And what I do is I use like Google Analytics User Explorer to figure out what their affinities are, or Facebook audience insights to figure out their interests and likes, or Twitter audience insights. And for me personally, my audience is really, really interested in entrepreneurship. Like 70% of them are just excited about entrepreneurship. And so what I do is I create content, off-top content that doesn't talk about Facebook Messenger, it doesn't talk about AdWords, but just talks about entrepreneurship. And it allows me to connect with millions of people and create brand affinity long before they ever decide to do Facebook Messenger marketing. The other hack that I have is to use platforms like Tabula to create new awareness and demand generation for your products and services to people who haven't heard of you. I know Tabula, they market themselves as performance, direct response marketing platform kind of thing, which is definitely true. But I actually think that there's another value here that's potentially even more valuable, which is just the enormous exposure that it can bring in terms of the exposure to certain types of audiences, especially people who haven't heard of you before, and then that there's value later on that it's generated by this because it influences outcomes on all your other campaigns. That's how marketing works. You need to, step 1, create and promote inspirational, memorable content about your brand to your target market via either organic or paid channels. People will form a bias towards your brand. They won't necessarily buy it right away, but later when the need arises to buy whatever it is you're selling, they'll do a branded search and they'll navigate to you, or they'll do an unbranded search but will be biased towards choosing you because they've heard of you before. And the really neat thing about this is, like, it's a virtuous cycle. The better the brand affinity you build, the higher the engagement rates. The higher engagement rates, the more brand affinity you build because of the higher performance of your organic and paid campaigns. So those were my favorite PPC hacks. I know I'm a little bit over time. I just wanted to talk a little bit about a special offer for Tabula Friends today. That messenger marketing platform, Mobil Monkey, that I was talking about earlier. It's usually $49 a month, but we're willing to offer it today for $49 for a year. So a 12-month subscription for $49, 92% off. Just use this link, bit.ly/tabula-mobilmonkey. I really need to come up with shorter URLs, but bit.ly/tabula-mobilmonkey, use code Tabula and save 92%. Thank you so much, Tabula, for inviting me here. I'm going to turn things over to my colleague Elad to take us home with the remaining ideas. I'm just going to make you presenter here. Stop showing screen. Or organizers, if there's a way to make Elad the presenter, because I don't seem to be able to do that. Great, thank you very much.
All right, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen and hear me right now. So first of all, thanks, Larry. Thanks a lot for that. I'm going to do basically a unicorn detox session now. So first of all, nice to meet you all. My name is Elad. I'm a VP of Media Operations at Tabula. A little bit about myself before I kick it off. I'm 41, just turned 41 actually a couple of days ago. I have two beautiful kids, as you can see, I think now on the screen. This is us on a holiday in Greece, eating a lot of sweet things. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it seems very sugary. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the revival of the upper funnel, which I think connects pretty well with like the last hack that Larry kind of finished with, which I thought was really cool. Before that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of performance marketing. So this is something that I suspect most of you who are on this call, on this webinar already know, but I think I wanted to kind of like lay the land before we get to kind of do my hacks of where we are. I think this is kind of, if you, for those who were been in the internet historically, I mean, this is definitely where the internet started from, and definitely where advertising on the internet started from, where you saw a lot of these pop-ups, pop-unders, like a lot of these like very untargeted banners. Everything was very, very new and fresh. And then we went through basically a couple of revolutions. The first one was search. Search engine marketing was a really big revolution for a couple of reasons. One, it was native, and I think that's actually one of the biggest inventions of search. Is eventually inventing the notion of native advertising at scale. And then the second thing, which basically means that you're serving next to an organic content without really be able to differentiate between the native and organic stuff. And then the second thing is it was under a brand of trust, and Google has built that trust over many years. And I think all of us can have an intrinsic feeling as consumers that we trust Google. So if something shows up here, we believe it. So that was the first revolution. The challenge with that revolution is, of course, it's got us all, and I consider myself part of the PPC world. Got us all hooked into this notion of we can go to the bottom of the funnel. We can basically do demand harvesting at scale, and it's all great. But as Larry mentioned, the problem with that, eventually, for people who know you, that's great. But for people who don't know you, it becomes increasingly more expensive and increasingly harder to demand harvest that audience. And what it leads to is this: basically, search becoming ridiculously expensive, and people are competing aggressively on it in order to actually get scale and continue to grow on that platform. And then the second revolution is the social revolution. Obviously, Facebook is leading that revolution from a size perspective, but a lot of the social platforms are there. And what it started a bit kind of flaky. And if you remember the early days of Facebook advertising, it was like right-hand rail, not really targeted, and it was purely desktop. I mean, fast forward a couple of years, and Facebook is a huge advertising machine. And again, it's using the same tricks that I've mentioned before. It has a trust. It has a trust leverage. Facebook's trust is basically about people. So you trust your friends on Facebook. So when you see content or ads next to it, you trust it. And the second thing, again, it is using very heavily the notion of native advertising. So you have organic content that you can see, and then next to it, you have native advertising, which looks and feels very similar. So people are more likely to click on it. And then Facebook basically pushed the boundaries and built a lot of these super strong performance tool like lookalike audiences and retargeting, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. But the challenge was they ended up in the same place. So eventually nowadays, if you go into Facebook, if you're a performance advertiser, you go in and you really want to see conversions coming very, very fast and very aggressively. So you try again to do like demand harvesting, bottom of the funnel, which leads again to this. And Larry mentioned the CPMs. I mean, a lot of the people on the call, I suspect, are Facebook advertisers. We are all seeing the insane CPMs on the platform and how expensive it is. Which leads me to what's happening in the rest of the web. In the meantime, not much. At the beginning, it was really just banner ads and display with all its blindness of ever-growing blindness of banners. And then at some point, people like Criteo and Admiral started introducing stuff like, and of course GDN as well, started introducing the notion of retargeting, which again allowed a performance marketeer to really ramp up their activity on bottom of the funnel. And guess where that leads us to? Exactly the same place. Exactly. So retargeting now is very, very expensive, even on the open web. Which leads me to where my main growth hack, and I'm gonna have some sub hacks underneath it, but my main growth hack eventually is this. Real marketers always work on their upper funnel, and this is basically kind of like a different version of what Larry was saying at the end of his presentation. Well, with some madman gimmicks attached, and which is basically if you continuously just harvest demand or try to harvest demand on platforms like Facebook and AdWords, all you're going to do is you're going to compete in a very, very crowded space with people and increasing prices. What you need to do is actually build your upper funnel and actually build new audiences that you can remarket afterwards more cheaply, and then be able to create new and bigger, ever-growing audiences for your business. And if you ask me my opinion, and this is kind of like obviously coming from a Tabula angle to this, there's a format that I think really works well. And what you can see here basically is how the Tabula product works. And you can see basically you have a brand that you trust, so we're appearing on the top publishers, not the publisher that Larry mentioned, of course, at the end of his presentation. We're appearing on top publishers, and which gives you the trust of people trust you, and then we are paying next to organic content. So there is this notion of native advertising just in this on publisher sites. So that's kind of the basic hack. And what this allows you to basically do is to build content and to basically grow your audience and expand your reach to places where audiences that people who don't know you yet, and do that at a price that allows you to then retarget from there the people who are interested in your content, who are interested in your brand. A little bit about the unit itself. I can see here a few examples. I mean, it's basically obviously across platforms, and we have all sorts of several types of placements and several types of what we call widgets or our feed, which is basically the ways we show our ads, and it's always kind of like as part of a unit within top publishers or very reputable publishers that we make sure are great for our advertisers. And in terms of the actual format, you can see here we have basically a card system where you have organic content, you have sponsored. Sometimes it's video, sometimes it's a carousel, sometimes it's just a static image. In all cases, it's alongside organic. And then I want to talk very briefly about 5 tips of success within the space or within the sponsored content space. The first one is overlay with relevant audience. Basically, you can cast a wide net, but I would always suggest targeting, even when you're casting a wide net, to target the users that you think are relevant for your business. And you can start with audience insights from GA, you can start from audience insights from Facebook, from Twitter, and basically start from there, and you can see which audiences that you're building is converting best eventually with your campaigns. The second tip is work the landing pages. The native format, the sponsored content format, is a very specific format, and it allows you to be much more playful and much more smart in the way you talk to people. When you go and you click on one of these links, you can actually put something that feels much more of a storytelling and allows you as a marketeer to actually give you more space to tell the story of the brand, and then you convert people, but you convert people slightly lower down the funnel rather than rather than like going with a very aggressive bottom of the funnel messaging, which you would see in a classic demand harvesting mode. Third thing, I mean, stating the obvious, I think everybody's doing that. A/B test everything, and it's a very interesting format to kind of try to understand what works and what doesn't work. So make sure that you test your creatives on an ongoing basis. Then the fourth tip, make sure that you set user expectation correctly and don't disappoint. This is a very interesting one, and I've seen that happening both on Facebook as well as on Tabula quite often, where people basically write something and you can see on the left here what happened next will shock you, and then you go into a very nice, wholesome, not so exciting page. This creates immediate bounce. This is a good example of an immediate bounce rate that will happen because you put something over shocking and over exciting just to get a click, and then afterwards you came into a normal and kind of like a wholesome site. So make sure that you kind of set the expectations right, and then don't disappoint people when they get to your landing page. And last but not least, and that's of course to Larry's final point, make sure that you close the loop with retargeting. So Tabula can help you build the audiences, and sponsored content in general can help you build the audiences and get to people that don't know you, and then afterwards you need to close the loop. I mean, you can do that with email, you can do it with retargeting on Tabula or on other platforms, but make sure that you close the loop. That's it from my side. And I think Megan and Lindsay, I think we're going to open it up for questions now, correct?
Yeah. So if anyone has questions, feel free to type them into us now, and we'll take a couple minutes to go over the Q&A. It looks like the first one we're getting here. How does Facebook Messenger subscription messaging work in the world of GDPR?
Oh, well, in order to connect any business to a user through Facebook Messenger, they have to accept these like the Facebook terms of conditions. So, there's certain restrictions that people are agreeing to just by using Messenger, and so you're basically piggybacking off of that. The other things, there's a couple other things that you need to know. If people ask to unsubscribe, you have to honor that, and if they ask to have their data deleted, you also have to honor that. So I actually think it's a less of a privacy issue than email marketing is, because with email it's like, you can email people can just get emails off of a truck, like I want 10,000 marketers, and you'll get a list of marketers. Here the opt-in is much more rigid, and they have to very explicitly opt in to receiving messages.
Okay, great, thank you. And let's see the next one here. How do you suggest fitting native into an established distribution budget?
So I think I would take it one step at a time is the short answer. Basically, I would take a test budget of around depending on the total budget. I would take a test budget of around 5 to 10% of your total budget, and try it out, and basically build yourself an audience that you can retarget, and see how your total conversion cost is looking versus your existing channel. So obviously, I mean, if you're a new customer to Tabula, you'll definitely be using AdWords and using Facebook in all likelihood, I would say. So make sure that you are able to test the full funnel rather than just look at it from a cost of conversion at Tabula. So take a 5-10% of your budget, put it in, see how much your end conversion cost is how is your CPA evolving, and based on that, decide whether you want to expand the budget or keep it steady.
Okay, great. And let's see, another one coming in here. Someone's asking specifically to Mobil Monkey, does Mobil Monkey work with Spanish content? And they're asking to confirm the advertisers create and mold it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's like you know, you can send whatever messages in whatever language you wish. So you know, it works in any language. But just going back to the previous question about setting budgets for this top of funnel stuff, I think it just has to do with like there's say you have like $1,000 monthly budget. I'm just using a round number, okay? The first dollar that you spend should be in remarketing, okay? So like, because that's going to be the one that performs the best. So if you're constrained by budget, you know, you spend, it's kind of the lowest hanging fruit, right? You spend the first few dollars that you have on remarketing. The problem with that is that it's constrained by audience size, okay? There's only so much you can spend on remarketing, because you know, if you only have you know 1,000 people in your audience, well then you know you're going to hit the frequency cap pretty quickly, you know. So basically, I would just throw everything you know, above and beyond your remarketing ad budget into these top of funnel things, and then that's kind of how I look at it. It's like you said, you just set your budget and allocate that way. All right.
Okay. Another one coming in specifically for Tabula. What are the benefits of Tabula Feed for advertisers?
Tabula Feed has a couple of very clear advantages for advertisers. The first one is the format itself is it feels very, very native for people. So in a way, it's basically kind of like an inference scroll, which has become a very clear and used format on the web. So people are very accustomed to that notion of a scrolling feed that you can basically kind of like skim through and pick the stuff that you're interested in, and skip through the stuff that you're not interested in. So that's one. The second thing, it kind of gives you a very strong sense of adjacency to high quality content. So basically you're mixed very, very elegantly between organic content from the publisher that you are advertising on, which again gives you this extra boost from a CTR perspective, because basically people are looking to say, oh, this is the next article that I want to. This could be the next article that I'm interested in reading. So it's a combination of like a general experience and UX that people are very accustomed to, and the fact that the setup itself allows it to be much more native in the experience with organic.
Okay. I think we have time for about 2 more questions here. How much time would you recommend investing in native platforms before determining whether or not it performs well for your content?
Always a good question. I think eventually it depends on your patience. On a more serious note, I do think that any channel, regardless whether it's native or anything, if you don't give it, I would say, a month and a half of really making the most of it, it's very, very hard to actually make something out of it, especially if it's a new channel for you and you've never tried it before. You need to test placements, you need to test creatives, you need to think about your landing pages, etc. So as a rule of thumb, I would say a month and a half is the bare minimum. I know a lot of people are very impatient, and I think people get used to that with the bottom of the funnel type platforms. AdWords is one of those things. You know, you put in a branding keyword, and you get conversions like the next hour, which is fantastic. But when you're building new audiences, you need to be a bit more patient with that, and also look at the entire conversion funnel. So I would say a month and a half is a good time frame for that.
Thank you. Okay, so last one here. Does Facebook Messenger marketing work for B2B businesses? Larry,
Yes. So
sorry, I think.
yes. So basically, something like $50 billion of ad spend is being spent on Facebook ads, and you know, it's about 30 to 40% of that is B2B. And so I think what advertisers are, saying is that they believe, B2B advertisers saying they believe that their target audience is on Facebook, which makes sense if there's like 2.3 billion active users or something like that. That's like, half the planet or something. When you're doing Facebook Messenger marketing, you're actually going after the same people who have Facebook accounts. So it's the same people, same targeting, et cetera. So I think, yeah, I see no reason, like if you have a Facebook page and you're a B2B, if you do Facebook advertising and you're a B2B company, like I totally think this is the same kind of pool of people that we're talking about.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for participating today as our panelists. And anyone else who sent in questions, we have a few more coming in. These will be shared with the speakers after we close the webinar, and we will respond to those over email to each individually. There will be a recording circulated to everyone later today, early tomorrow. And yeah, thank you for everyone for joining, and thanks Aladdin and Larry.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.